The recording begins with static. Then a trembling male voice cuts through the silence. "Please, I need help." His breathing is shallow, panicked, as if each word costs him strength. "Something's wrong. My body, it won't stop shaking." The dispatcher tries to steady him. "Sir, calm down. Can you tell me your name?" There's a pause, then a muffled cough. "Daniel? Daniel Reed." His tone fractures. "I just found out. I tested positive. HIV. She knew." The silence that follows is heavier than the words themselves. It is the kind of silence that lives at the center of every true crime story, where the fear is not of death itself, but of betrayal so deep it feels worse than dying. The call continues. Daniel's breathing turns ragged, his sentences dissolving. He mutters her name, barely audible. Lena. Then the phone clatters to the floor, leaving only the hollow sound of an open line. For investigators, that call would become the first thread of a devastating web. But for now, it was just another emergency, another voice on the edge of collapse. What no one realized was that this was not an accident, not a tragic twist of fate. It was the opening act of something deliberate, calculated, and years in the making. Daniel had been with her for months, believing he was in love. Friends described him as devoted, perhaps even blinded by the relationship. He had introduced her as the one, proudly ignoring whispers of her distant demeanor. Now his last coherent words revealed the truth, that she carried more than secrets in her veins. The paramedics arrived too late to hear him speak again. They found him pale, sweating, his phone still buzzing on the floor beside the bed. In the sterile white of the hospital, his eyes fluttered open once more as if clinging to life. He repeated her name, softer this time, almost reverent despite every... Lena Morgan did not stand out in a crowd. To the neighbors in her apartment complex, she was quiet, polite, the kind of tenant who smiled in passing but rarely lingered for conversation. She worked a steady job at a small law office, wore muted colors, and kept to herself. If you passed her on the street, you might not look twice. But the most dangerous people often wear the most ordinary masks. Behind her carefully measured expressions lay a world no one else could see. She kept her life in compartments, work in one, friendships in another, lovers in their own separate boxes. She was disciplined, almost meticulous, about never letting them overlap. Her phone was a weapon of precision, different ringtones for different men, carefully timed responses, secrets tucked between text messages that appeared harmless to anyone who might glance over her shoulder. Those who thought they knew her were wrong. Even Daniel, the man who had whispered her name in a hospital bed, never truly saw her. He believed her laughter, her soft touches, her promises of devotion. But Lena had built a life on illusions, and Daniel had been just one more believer in a carefully crafted performance. On a chilly autumn evening, 2 weeks before Daniel's phone call, Lena sat alone in her apartment. The lamp on the side table cast long shadows across her living room. A photo album lay open on her lap, though she wasn't really looking at the pictures. Her fingers traced the edges absently, her mind elsewhere. The sound of her phone buzzing broke the silence. She let it ring twice before answering, her voice calm, almost gentle. "Hello?" "Lena, it's me." Daniel's voice was full of warmth. "I was just thinking about you." She smiled faintly, though her eyes did not soften. "Were you? You know I can't stop. I think you're it for me." Her silence stretched, just long enough to make him nervous before she finally replied, "That's sweet, Daniel." The call ended with reassurances, promises of seeing each other the next day. But as soon as she set the phone down, the softness vanished from her face. Her expression hardened, her jaw tightening as though she were holding back words no one would ever hear. Lena's world was not defined by affection. It was defined by memory. And in the quiet moments when no one else was around, the past pressed against her like a shadow she could never escape. 15 years had passed since the night that changed her, but the wound never closed. Betrayal had carved itself into her bones, and in her mind, love had become indistinguishable from violence. The secrets she carried were not only about her lovers or her diagnosis, they were about why, about the kind of pain that reshapes a person's soul until revenge feels like the only cure. Friends, those rare few she allowed close, often described her as independent, guarded. Some admired her strength, others quietly feared her distance. But none of them suspected the truth, that every choice she made, every smile, every kiss, was part of a design invisible to them all. Daniel's call would soon pull detectives into her orbit. But to truly understand Lena, one had to look not at the men she hurt, but at the men she chose. Each name on her list had meaning. Each lover was selected with deliberate intent. And Daniel, though he believed he was the center of her universe, was only the first thread she would pull from a carefully woven web. As Lena placed the photo album back on the shelf and poured herself a glass of wine, her phone buzzed again. A different ringtone this time. A different man. She lifted it slowly, her lips curving, into a faint smile. "Hello?" she said softly. And just like that, another lover stepped into the story, unaware he was walking into the same trap. Daniel Reed had no idea he was being studied. To him, Lena was simply the woman he'd dreamed of finding after years of broken relationships. She seemed calm where he was anxious, steady where he was uncertain. He told his friends that she grounded him, that with her he finally felt like a man who mattered. But Lena didn't love Daniel. She never had. He was not her beginning, only her first step. To outsiders, their romance looked ordinary, almost enviable. They went to dinner at quiet restaurants, attended weekend markets where Lena held his hand with a practiced gentleness. At his workplace, colleagues rolled their eyes when he spoke about her for the third time in a day. "She's different," he insisted. "She sees me." Yet Daniel didn't realize that Lena was watching him as carefully as he watched her. Every smile, every secret glance, she calculated what to give and what to withhold. He thought her silences were shyness. In truth, they were rehearsals. One night, as rain pattered against Daniel's apartment windows, he poured 2 glasses of red wine and settled on the couch beside her. The movie played in the background, forgotten as he leaned closer. "Lena," he whispered, "I don't want to scare you off, but I think I love you." Her eyes flickered. For the briefest second, something hardened in her face, but it vanished almost instantly. She placed a hand over his, warm and reassuring. "Love is a big word, Daniel." "I know," he said quickly, almost stumbling over his words. "But I mean it. I've never felt this way before." She smiled faintly. "Then let's take it one step at a time." It was exactly the response he needed, careful enough to sound cautious, tender enough to feel sincere. He kissed her then, believing he had seen the true Lena. But what Daniel didn't know was that Lena had already chosen him long before he confessed his love. He wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her first, the first man who would carry the weight of her secret, though he didn't know it yet. Narration often paints love as a matter of fate, two souls colliding at the right time. But for Lena, it was not fate. It was selection. Daniel was vulnerable, eager, and, most importantly, trusting. He would not question her disappearances, her moments of distance. He would fill the silences with his own devotion, blind to the storm building beneath her calm exterior. In private, Lena's control was precise. She decided when to answer his calls, when to vanish for hours, when to suddenly appear at his door with a soft apology and a promise of closeness. Daniel mistook these rhythms for the complications of love. In reality, they were the mechanics of manipulation. Weeks turned into months. Daniel's feelings deepened, but Lena's remained unchanged. She was not there for love. She was there for purpose. And Daniel, unknowingly, had stepped into a role scripted long before he ever met her. Her past was beginning to bleed into her present, though Daniel could not see it. The way her eyes lingered on him when he was vulnerable, the way her grip tightened when they embraced, it wasn't affection. It was memory, twisted into something darker. The final moment came on a Sunday afternoon. They had spent the morning together, laughter echoing through his small kitchen. Daniel, glowing with contentment, leaned across the counter. "Promise me something," he said. "What's that?" "Promise me you'll never lie to me." For a heartbeat, Lena froze. The words hit her like a stone dropped into deep water, ripples spreading across the surface of her calm exterior. Then she nodded, her voice even. "I promise." Daniel believed her without hesitation. He kissed her, grateful, his heart swelling with trust. But Lena knew the truth. The lie had already begun the first night she smiled at him. Daniel was not her last lover. He was simply the beginning. And as her phone buzzed later that night with another message, another man waiting, Lena realized her plan was only just taking shape. Lena's double life did not begin with chaos. It began with control. She was careful, deliberate, methodical. Every new man entered her orbit as if by chance, but chance had nothing to do with it. She studied them first, learning what they longed for, what they feared, and where they were weakest. Daniel remained the anchor, the first to be pulled in, but soon there were others. A co-worker from the law office, flattered by her sudden attention. A married neighbor who lingered too long when she offered a glass of wine. A gym trainer who thought her shy smile meant vulnerability. Each man believed he had discovered something rare in Lena, unaware he was walking into the same design. To them, Lena was whatever they needed. To one, she was gentle and needy. To another, confident and intoxicating. She shifted roles with ease, her performances flawless. No man compared notes because no man knew the others existed. Late one evening, Lena sat across from Mark, the married neighbor. The beauty of her deception was its simplicity. Each excuse was ordinary, believable, even boring. And that was the genius of it. Ordinary lies raise no suspicion. But beneath the control, there was something darker. Alone in her apartment, Lena sometimes stood before the bathroom mirror, her reflection lit harshly by fluorescent light. She would stare at herself for long minutes, searching her own face as if daring it to reveal the truth. "You're not the victim anymore," she whispered once, her voice low and steady. "Now you're the one they'll remember." The words hung in the air, unsettling in their quiet certainty. The seductions multiplied, but so did the risks. Balancing one life was simple, balancing 5 was not. A stray text at the wrong time, a misplaced article of clothing, a slip of the tongue. Any of these could unravel everything. Still, Lena moved with composure, almost daring fate to catch her. Each man believed her loyalty, her body, her heart belonged only to him. Each man carried her secret, though none yet knew it. Soon, however, her secret would no longer remain silent. Because while Lena was orchestrating her pattern of seduction, something else was already unfolding. Something that began not in a bedroom, but in a sterile, windowless clinic. And in that clinic, Lena would receive the piece of news that turned her quiet web of deceit into a weapon. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Lena sat rigid in the molded plastic chair, her purse clutched tightly against her chest. Around her, people flipped through old magazines, eyes lowered, as if avoiding one another might erase the reason they were all here. She didn't belong here, or at least that's what she told herself. She was healthy, careful, composed. Whatever this was, as it would be routine, a misunderstanding, something that could be dismissed with a wave of the doctor's hand. But beneath her steady breathing, her pulse thudded hard against her ribs. When the nurse finally called her name, Lena rose with practiced calm. The hallway was long and sterile, the buzzing fluorescent lights making the air feel colder. She was guided into a small exam room where a doctor in his 40s shuffled paperwork. He greeted her politely, but his eyes carried the weight of what he was about to say. "Miss Morgan," he began, voice measured. "Thank you for coming in." Lena nodded, setting her purse on her lap. "Of course. I assume everything is fine?" The doctor hesitated. "I'm afraid the results came back positive." The word hung in the air like smoke. Lena's expression didn't change. She blinked once, slowly, as though she hadn't heard him properly. "Positive," she repeated, her voice flat. "Yes," he said gently. "You tested positive for HIV." The room seemed to shrink. The hum of the lights grew louder, pressing into her ears. For a long moment she stared at the doctor without speaking. Most patients, he expected, would cry or collapse or ask frantic questions, but Lena did none of those things. She only straightened in her chair, her face unreadable. "How long?" she asked finally. "It's difficult to say, but with treatment, people live long, healthy lives. We'll discuss your options." She cut him off. "Options don't matter." The doctor frowned. "Miss Morgan." "Thank you," she said firmly, rising to her feet. "That's all I need to hear." Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled as she gripped her purse. Outside, the evening air hit her like a slap. She walked quickly down the clinic steps, her heels clicking against the pavement. The city bustled around her, horns blaring, people laughing, life moving forward. But for Lena, everything had gone still. She found herself standing at a crosswalk, staring at the red light. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the glass of a storefront across the street. For the first time, she saw herself not as the woman she presented to the world, but as something else entirely. Damaged, marked, set apart. Yet as the seconds ticked by, her breathing slowed. The trembling in her hands stilled. Because somewhere beneath the shock, another thought surfaced. This wasn't an ending. It was an opportunity. Back in her apartment, Lena poured a glass of wine and sat in silence. The doctor's words echoed in her mind, but instead of despair, they ignited something sharper. She whispered into the stillness, testing the words as though tasting them for the first time. "They'll never know." It was true. No one would know unless she told them, and she had no intention of telling anyone. The diagnosis, once a threat, now felt like a weapon, invisible, silent, deadly, and entirely in her control. In documentaries, this is the turning point, the moment where a victim becomes something else, something darker. For Lena, it was not just about disease. It was about justice, twisted into revenge. Because 15 years earlier, someone had taken everything from her. And now, at last, she had found a way to take something back. 15 years earlier, Lena was not the woman who walked into clinics or manipulated lovers with calculated precision. She was 16, bright-eyed and full of hope, a girl who trusted too easily and believed that people would protect her rather than destroy her. It was the night of her 17th birthday when everything changed. A party she had anticipated for weeks, filled with friends and laughter, turned into a scene she would never forget. The first signs were subtle. Whispers behind her back, stifled laughter, people glancing at her with amusement she didn't understand. Her closest friend, someone she had confided in endlessly, avoided her gaze. Lena's stomach churned. Something was wrong, but she couldn't name it. Then came the betrayal. Her father's old friend, a man she had always trusted, approached her with a special gift, something he said would make her feel grown up, seen, desired. Lena froze, sensing unease. But the words, the smile, the carefully cultivated kindness lulled her into a false sense of security. "You'll love it," he whispered, pressing a small box into her hands. "Open it later, when no one is around." She nodded, clutching it tightly. The wrapping paper was beautiful, gold foil that caught the light. At that moment, she didn't know that her life had pivoted on a single, irreversible decision. Trusting someone she shouldn't. The aftermath was brutal. She tried to speak, to tell her parents, to confide in a friend, but no one believed her. Her words were dismissed as exaggeration, or worse, as lies. The people who were supposed to protect her, family, friends, mentors, looked away. The laughter of that party still echoed in her ears, a cruel reminder of innocence lost. The shame settled in like a stone lodged in her chest. It was not only the betrayal of one man, but the indifference of everyone around her. The trust she had placed in the world had been shattered, and she learned, far too young, that justice was not guaranteed. Lena withdrew after that night, retreating into herself. She studied people, memorized their behaviors, their weaknesses. She observed how lies could be hidden in smiles, how betrayal could come dressed as kindness. Her teenage years became a series of calculated lessons, how to survive, how to protect herself, and how to make sure she would never again be powerless. At school, she excelled quietly, her grades impeccable, her demeanor composed. Teachers praised her, classmates admired her, but no one saw the storm inside. She learned to channel rage into control, fear into planning. The trauma had not broken her, it had built her into something else. At 16, she swore silently, sitting in her room one night, that if the world ever gave her power, she would not hesitate to use it. Not for petty revenge, but for a justice that had been denied her. She would make the world understand betrayal the way she had experienced it. Deep, intimate, unforgettable. Every decision she made afterward was informed by that night. Every relationship, every friendship, every secret she kept was part of a silent ledger in her mind. People would come, people would go, but she would never again be at the mercy of someone else's whims. The past shaped her carefully constructed present. Lena's calm, collected persona, the woman Daniel loved, the seductress weaving a pattern through multiple lovers, was a direct product of that trauma. Her hidden diagnosis became not just a personal crisis, but a weapon, forged from the lessons of betrayal learned so many years ago. And as the dominoes of her plan began to fall, those 15 years of careful observation and silent rage would finally find their release. Each man she touched, each secret she carried, was a small echo of that night, a subtle reminder that betrayal leaves marks, and revenge, when patient, can be precise. The stage was set. The first victims had been chosen, and the story that began with a single phone call was only just unfolding. The first signs were subtle. Daniel, once full of energy and confidence, began to notice odd fatigue, persistent fevers, and unexplained bruises on his arms. At first, he blamed stress, the long hours at work, or a passing flu. But there was an unease he couldn't shake, a whisper in the back of his mind that something was wrong, something he couldn't control. Mark, the married neighbor, experienced the same creeping dread. His confidence faltered at work, his once steady hands shaking during routine tasks. The trainer at the gym, who had believed he shared a special intimacy with Lena, began to avoid mirrors, counting every small rash and lingering ache as evidence of a failing body. It was as if a silent predator had moved through their lives, leaving a trail of fear and confusion in its wake. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed one night, the room dimly lit by a single bedside lamp. His hands trembled as he dialed Lena's number, each ring echoing through the quiet apartment like a heartbeat. "Daniel?" Her voice was calm, even melodic. I don't feel right," he confessed, voice cracking. "I've been sick. Really sick." "Maybe it's just stress," she said gently, masking any trace of concern. "You've been working too hard." "No," he insisted, shaking his head. "It's something else. I need you to help me understand." Her silence stretched long enough for him to feel panic rising. When she finally spoke, it was soft, almost a whisper. "I'm here, Daniel. Calm down. Everything will be okay." He believed her. The pattern continued. Friends noticed Daniel withdrawing, his energy fading. Mark's spouse, unaware of the late-night meetings with Lena, began to suspect infidelity, tension filling their home like smoke. The trainer excused himself from work, citing sudden medical appointments. And yet, no one connected the threads. Lena watched from the shadows, carefully maintaining the facade of normalcy. She was polite, charming, attentive. To the outside world, nothing had changed. But inside, the first dominoes were falling, one by one, in a sequence she had orchestrated years in advance. The brilliance and horror of her plan lay in its invisibility. Unlike violent crime scenes, there were no obvious signs, no blood, no forced entry, no physical confrontation, only suspicion, fear, and the slow erosion of health and trust. Neighbors whispered about Daniel's pale complexion, his sudden nervousness. Friends sent messages to check on him, worried but confused. Mark's professional reputation began to falter as he missed meetings, called in sick, and stumbled over once simple tasks. Achman carried a secret they didn't understand, unaware that the true source was Lena herself, sitting calmly in her apartment, reading a book, or preparing for another encounter. The invisible web tightened. Each victim became a living, breathing testament to her control, her precision, her vengeance. The consequences of that night 15 years ago had transformed into a force that now reached across multiple lives, quietly devastating anyone who had trusted her. One evening, Daniel finally broke. He confronted Lena at her apartment door, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Why is this happening to me? What did I do?" She met his gaze evenly, her expression serene, almost maternal. "Nothing," she said softly. "You've done nothing wrong. Sometimes things just happen." He searched her face, desperate for explanation, but found only calm, as if the storm consuming him was invisible to her. At that moment, the first true cracks began to appear. The men were starting to notice patterns, to connect the fear with the presence of Lena in their lives. But it was too late. The sequence had begun, and the invisible dominoes continued to fall. Outside, the world remained oblivious. Inside, the first victims of Lena's carefully constructed plan were unraveling, each one carrying the secret she had placed inside them, unaware that the story was only beginning, and that the investigation would soon follow. Detective Karen Mills had seen many patterns in her career, but nothing prepared her for this. One by one, young men began appearing at the county hospital, each testing positive for HIV, each tracing their exposure to a single woman. At first, it seemed coincidental, a string of unfortunate cases. But as the numbers climbed, she realized the truth. Someone was deliberately infecting multiple partners. Her team began pulling records, tracing appointments, relationships, and social connections. Daniel Reed was the first to come forward. The call had been panicked, his body weak, his voice trembling. He gave his statement with honesty, unaware that his words would ignite the largest investigation of Karen's career. The detectives worked tirelessly, mapping timelines and contacts. The investigation was meticulous, painstaking. Every message, every date, every casual encounter had to be logged. It was like piecing together a jigsaw puzzle with invisible pieces, each one crucial, yet frustratingly elusive. Detective Mills called in an epidemiologist to analyze the infection patterns. "These aren't random," the specialist said, eyes scanning charts. "Someone is targeting personal vulnerability in the men involved. Lena had entered their lives when they were most susceptible." "She's strategic," Karen said to her partner, Detective Alvarez. "This isn't passion, this is precision. She waits, observes, and strikes when it matters most. It's psychological manipulation at its peak." Alvarez frowned. "But why? What's driving her?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "That's what we're going to find out. But whatever it is, it's personal. And it's decades in the making." The investigation became all-consuming. Detectives cross-referenced medical records, conducted interviews, and scrutinized Lena's movements. Each lead pointed to her, but she remained untouchable. No physical evidence, no overt confrontation, only the invisible pattern she had left behind. As Karen pieced together the narrative, the human cost became painfully clear. Families were in turmoil, careers were collapsing, and the men she had infected were struggling with fear, anger, and confusion. Lena's reach was wider than anyone had anticipated. Finally, the team prepared for confrontation. They had the evidence, the testimonies, and the timeline. Now, all that remained was to face the architect herself, to meet Lena Morgan, the woman who had orchestrated pain with cold, calculated precision. The stage was set for a collision that would shake everyone involved. The victims, the detectives, and Lena herself were about to step into the most intense chapter of the story, the confrontation that would expose her motives, her past, and the full extent of her calculated vengeance. Daniel Reed stood outside Lena's apartment, hands shaking, breath shallow. The world around him blurred into dull background noise, the distant hum of traffic, the faint chatter of neighbors, the soft whir of a passing lawnmower. But none of us saw. It mattered. Only Lena mattered. Only the truth. He had spent weeks piecing together fragments of evidence, listening to rumors, noticing the subtle patterns she had woven through his life and the lives of others. Each revelation was like a knife twisting in his chest. And now, finally, he could confront her directly. The door opened before he could knock. Lena stood there, calm and composed, as if she had been expecting him. The faint glow from the hallway lamp highlighted the angles of her face, the cold precision in her eyes. "Daniel," she said softly, almost kindly. "You shouldn't be here." "Shouldn't be here," he echoed, voice cracking. "Lena, you did this. You infected me. All of us. Why? Her expression remained unchanged. She gestured for him to enter. Sit. Let's talk. He stepped inside, the apartment eerily quiet, the furniture perfectly arranged, the air heavy with anticipation. He seated himself opposite her, feeling the weight of years of deception pressing down. Why? He repeated, louder this time. I trusted you. I loved you. I thought you cared about me. Lena studied him carefully, her fingers folded in her lap. I do care, Daniel, she said softly. But you have to understand. It's not about you. It's about what happened to me 15 years ago. Daniel froze, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? She leaned forward slightly. When I was 16, I was betrayed. Completely. Humiliated. Abandoned by the people I trusted most. They didn't protect me. They laughed. They ignored me. I swore I would never be powerless again. And I wasn't. Her voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of rage, a quiet storm that had been building for years. Every choice I've made since that night has been about control, about making sure that betrayal didn't go unpunished. You, all of you, were part of a larger plan. You were never innocent in my story. You were just pieces of it. Daniel shook his head, incredulous. You call this justice? Infecting people? Destroying lives? She tilted her head slightly, her lips curling in a faint smile. I call it balance. The world took everything from me once. I'm only giving it back, measured, precise, calculated. Nobody saw it coming, nobody suspected it. That's the difference between being a victim and being in control. For the first time, Daniel noticed the glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes, the cold calculation that had guided her every step. Rage and grief collided in his chest, leaving him trembling. You're sick, he whispered. Not physically, mentally. You're broken. I am broken, she admitted, voice low but unwavering. And broken people survive in ways others cannot imagine. I survived, and now you all feel a fraction of what I felt. Not the pain of betrayal itself, but the fear, the uncertainty, the helplessness. I gave it back in a form you couldn't escape. Silence filled the apartment, thick and suffocating. Daniel's mind raced. He wanted to scream, to strike, to collapse, but all he could do was stare at her, the woman who had been his lover, his confidant, the architect of his undoing. Finally, he asked the question that had been echoing in his mind since the hospital. Do you regret it? Her gaze met his directly. No hesitation, no remorse. Regret doesn't serve me, Daniel. Justice, measured carefully, serves me, and I have served it well. Daniel sank back, defeated, realizing that the person he had loved and trusted was gone, replaced by someone unrecognizable, meticulous, and terrifying. The confrontation ended not with violence, but with clarity. Lena had revealed her motives, her past, and the reasoning behind her meticulously calculated actions. She had no intention of stopping, no intention of begging for forgiveness, and no desire for redemption. Outside the apartment, the investigation waited, the courtroom ahead, and the ripple effects of her vengeance poised to spread further. The confrontation had unveiled the truth, but the world's reckoning was only beginning. The courtroom was silent, except for the soft shuffle of papers and the occasional cough. Lena Morgan sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded neatly in front of her, eyes fixed on the prosecutor with a calm intensity. The media had filled the gallery, eager for a glimpse of the woman who had upended so many lives, yet she remained unreadable, serene, untouched by the murmurs surrounding her. Detective Karen Mills watched from the back, notebook in hand, memories of the investigation flashing vividly. The invisible web Lena had woven for years was now laid bare for all to see. Every encounter, every pattern, every carefully timed betrayal was documented and presented with surgical precision. The prosecution opened with Daniel Reed's testimony. His voice trembled as he recounted the months he had spent with Lena, the gradual onset of illness, and the fear that had consumed him. "She smiled at me," he said, eyes fixed on the jury. "She held me. She said she loved me. And all the while, she was planning this. Planning my destruction." Lena's expression remained unchanged, serene, almost expectant. She did not flinch, did not look away. The cold calm of her demeanor contrasted sharply with the raw emotion of the courtroom. The prosecution laid out evidence from the clinic records, messages, and interviews with other men who had been infected. Each piece reinforced the same conclusion. Lena had acted with deliberate intent, using her diagnosis as a weapon to exact revenge, meticulously calculated over years. When the defense attorney rose, he framed her actions as the product of trauma, a response to an injustice she had suffered 15 years earlier. Lena Morgan was betrayed, he told the court. She suffered in silence, hidden from the world, carrying a wound that festered for years. Her actions, while tragic, are rooted in a life shaped by cruelty, by betrayal. The courtroom absorbed the words in silence. Some felt sympathy, others disbelief. Justice, the defense argued, needed context. But context could not erase the victim's suffering. Lena's own testimony was brief, delivered in the same measured tone she had carried through the investigation. "I did what I felt I had to do," she said softly, unwavering. "The past shaped me. I am responsible for my actions, but I am not ashamed. Those who hurt me taught me the meaning of control. I merely applied it to others who were careless enough to trust me." The words were chilling, yet calm, without remorse, without hesitation. The jury listened intently, absorbing the logic, the cold precision behind a mind shaped by trauma and revenge. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom held its collect of breath. One by one, the foreperson read the verdict, guilty on multiple counts of intentional harm and endangerment. Lena's sentence would be severe, ensuring she could not continue her pattern. Yet even as the gavel fell and the sentence was read aloud, Lena did not flinch. She nodded once, faintly, accepting the judgment, almost as if it had been anticipated all along. There was no fear in her eyes, no pleas for mercy, only the certainty that she had delivered her own form of justice and that the court's punishment was merely another measure in the scale. Detective Mills noted the calm in Lena's demeanor. Many would have crumbled, but Lena's mind remained sharp, unshaken. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, that redemption was not a right. It was a choice, and she had chosen a different path. Outside the courthouse, media cameras flashed and reporters clamored for a statement. The victims, including Daniel, walked past, burdened by the lingering pain, the knowledge that justice had been served, but the scars would remain. Lena's trial concluded, the sentence imposed, yet the psychological weight of her actions would ripple outward for years. Justice, in its most conventional sense, had been achieved. But redemption, the true human closure, was absent. Lena had left a trail too deliberate, too intimate, to allow forgiveness, even from herself. The case would be remembered, studied, and recounted in true crime circles for decades. A story of betrayal, calculated vengeance, and a woman whose mind had transformed suffering into methodical retribution. And while the courtroom lights dimmed and the gavel echoed in memory, the world understood one uncomfortable truth. Justice could be served, but redemption was something Lena had never sought, and perhaps never would. The courtroom lights had dimmed, the gavel's echo faded, but the consequences of Lena Morgan's actions reverberated far beyond the walls of justice. Daniel Reed walked out of the courthouse with a sense of hollow relief. Justice had been served, yet the weight of what he had endured lingered. Each memory, each moment of trust violated, pressed against his chest like an invisible hand. His friends noticed the change immediately. Once vibrant and confident, Daniel now carried the shadows of fear and uncertainty. Nights were restless. Mornings brought unease that no cup of coffee could erase. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, each appointment a fragile attempt to piece together the shards of a life disrupted by deliberate manipulation. Mark, the married neighbor, faced a different kind of fallout. His home was fractured, the whisper of suspicion and betrayal between him and his spouse irreparable. He had believed in Lena's charm, her attentiveness, the warmth that masked a precise, calculated plan. Now, years of trust were gone, replaced by a constant, gnawing anxiety. He avoided friends, avoided mirrors, avoided the reminders that his life had been silently invaded. Even the gym trainer, who had once believed his connection with Lena was unique, found himself haunted by fear of the unseen. Every ache in his body, every rash, every unexpected fatigue became a source of dread. The invisible virus she had wielded as a weapon remained a permanent marker of her control, a reminder that trust carried costs far beyond imagination. In prison, Lena adapted to her new environment with the same meticulous composure that had defined her life outside. Her cell was orderly, her routines precise. The guards and fellow inmates quickly recognized her calm, almost impervious nature. Lena did not mourn Frey, Edom, nor did she express regret. To her, the world had already shifted. She had delivered her own justice long before the law intervened, and the sentence was merely another measure of consequence she had anticipated. Conversations between inmates and guards hinted at fascination, fear, and begrudging respect. She was the woman who had orchestrated pain invisibly, methodically, and with chilling precision. To some, she was a cautionary tale. To others, she was a psychological enigma, impossible to fully understand. Daniel met with the other victims sporadically, each of them struggling with isolation and the unspoken knowledge that they had been manipulated by the same mind. Therapy and support groups offered solace, but the scars were deeper than anyone could measure. The betrayal had altered their perception of intimacy, trust, and human connection. Even after justice was served, the ripple effects continued to reshape relationships, careers, and self-perception. "It's like a shadow," Daniel admitted to a counselor one afternoon. "You see sunlight, but the darkness never fully leaves." The counselor nodded solemnly. Trauma leaves marks beyond what the eye can see. Healing takes time, and sometimes it's never complete. But acknowledgement, understanding, that's the start. Meanwhile, the media continued to document the story, framing it as a case study in deliberate manipulation, psychological trauma, and the consequences of hidden vengeance. Books, podcasts, and documentaries dissected the events, analyzing every decision Lena had made, every life she had touched. Her name became synonymous with both meticulous planning and the destructive potential of revenge left unchecked. Yet even in the public eye, one truth remained constant. While legal justice could punish actions, it could not restore innocence, nor fully repair the personal damage inflicted. Months passed. Daniel learned to live with the uncertainty that lingered in his body. Mark cautiously rebuilt his fractured family life, and the gym trainer sought peace in solitary routines. Lena, in her confined cell, remained untouched in spirit, a quiet architect of past chaos. Her sentence confined her physically, but her mind continued to navigate the careful strategies that had defined her existence. The aftermath of betrayal was permanent, shaping lives in ways that justice alone could not erase. And yet, the story was not over. The echoes of Lena Morgan's calculated vengeance continued to reverberate, each ripple a reminder that actions, once set in motion, could not be undone.